that National Treasury has again started withholding grant funding from the city because of the appointment of a certain official within the MBDA that had serious disciplinary matters hanging over his head, and the city was warned not to appoint Mr. Kaba as the CEO of the MBDA, and unfortunately that was done against the recommendations, and Treasury has started to withhold grant funding again. So we absolutely where we were 3 years ago, and that makes me very sad, because over the last couple of months I believe that the city was making progress, and it's very sad to see that we're regressing again.
Leaders and thinkers, movers and shakers, welcome to the GLC Podcast, a very special edition of the podcast today. We've got former Executive Mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, Retief Odendaal. And today, Retief, I just wanted us to chat a bit about your time as Executive Mayor and a bit about your experience in local government. I feel, and I think that a lot of people, I was just saying this before you got started, a lot of people don't have a thorough understanding of how, including myself actually, of how local government works. So I'm hoping from this conversation, a lot of people are going to be educated just about how local government works, about what's happening in the metro, and about perhaps going into 2024, what you see as a leader in the Eastern Cape and as a leader in South Africa, what you see happening in the upcoming election. So welcome. Thank you for sitting down with us.
No, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. And I like the fact that you call me a former mayor. What you actually should have said is a has-been mayor, you know, and
What's
there's
the
nothing
difference?
more has-been than a has-been mayor.
What's the
No, it means
difference
that I'm past tense.
I wanted to start with how you got into politics. I mean, I don't know how long you've been in the DA.
Okay, so I got involved as a student, actually. You know, a lot of people would say that I look quite old. I'm not that old. I was born in 82, so I'm 41 years old. I became involved with the DA in 2003, 2004, when I was still a student at then UPE. You know, I actually wanted to, I knew I was going to go into politics. I knew I was going to become a councillor. Already when I was in high school, I knew I was going to become an attorney, and I wanted to become a city councillor after I joined the junior city council. And so I set my goal, and I studied at UPE, as I've said. I was admitted as an attorney in 2008 at age of 25, and at age 26 I actually became one of the youngest city councillors in Nelson Mandela Bay since the existence of Nelson Mandela Metro Municipality. And I was a ward councillor for the first couple of years. Then in 2014, I became the leader of the opposition in council at age, I think, 31, if I remember correctly. So I was quite young. And in 2016, the DA managed to form a coalition, and Athol Trollip became the mayor. He then appointed me as the MMC for finance, which meant that I oversaw the finances of the city, which at that stage was about a 15 billion rand budget. That's quite scary, you know, giving politicians access to, well, not access to that much money, but giving them the power to oversee budgets to the extent of billions of rands. And then, unfortunately, we were ousted in government in 2018. And in 2019, I left Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality, and I became a member of the provincial legislature, and where I served on provincial treasury as well as on rural development. And then last year, when there was a prospect for the DA to form another coalition in Nelson Mandela Bay, I was approached by Helen Ziller, and she asked me whether I would be willing to apply to become the mayor in Nelson Mandela Bay, because we're a party of due process. You don't just get appointed, you have to apply and go through quite a rigorous... No, you don't get deployed. There's quite a rigorous application process.
What's the difference between your appointment and the deployment, between the two processes?
So first of all, you have to apply, you know, and it's open to anyone, whether in this case, I wasn't a councillor in Nelson Mandela Bay. I was a member of the provincial legislature, and I applied, and I had to contest. There were, in fact, 5 applications for the position of mayoral candidate. Well, 4 of them were councillors in Nelson Mandela Bay, like Dr. Malcolm Fick, who was then spokesperson for finance in the Metro Caucus, as well as Rano Kaiser. He was caucus leader at that stage, and a whole host of other people. But the point I'm trying to make is that in Democratic Alliance, you don't just get deployed. You have to apply, and the best candidate with the best score,
which was yourself
at that stage, luckily, got the nod to become the mayoral candidate. Yes, and within 6 weeks after that, we managed to form a coalition, which was a very complicated coalition. It was a 10-party coalition. It's never been done in South Africa. That was the biggest coalition to date, and depending on what side of the argument you'll stand, a lot of people will say that it was actually a very successful coalition. There was a lot of naysayers that said that we were never going to be successful. It was never going to last, even beyond a month. And there were a lot of challenges because it was certainly difficult keeping it together. But in the end, it lasted 8 months, and we made considerable progress in Nelson Mandela Bay within that period of 8 months. And it only collapsed because one of our partners, who is the Northern Alliance, and had 3 seats in council, was offered the position of mayor.
The ANC EFF.
Supported by the ANC and the EFF. But it's absolutely nonsensical, because nowhere in the world do you see minority parties being elected as mayors.
But it happened here before with
yes, but and that ended in tears for the people of Nelson Mandela Bay, because the city nearly collapsed. At that stage, the city saw National Treasury withholding grant funding to the tune of 1.6 billion rand, and it nearly had the city on its knees.
Was that during Mongabeli
Bobani's tenure? And I can disclose today.
Speak about that a bit later on, but I want to take 2 or 3 steps back and look at the time when you were part of Ethel Cholib's mayoral committee. I had a lovely conversation with Ethel a couple of months ago. He was on our podcast, and we spoke at length about his time as the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay. You just said that you were the MMC of what? Finance.
Yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to ask was, Ethel often says, and a lot of other people often say, that you guys turned the city around, and in 1 year, the metro became the second best performing metro. I'm not sure how true that is. What does that mean? What did you do? If you could just give us a picture of what was going wrong, what are the practical things that you guys did, and how you were able to turn the city around in a year, you know.
Okay, so I think what you must understand when claims like that are made, you must understand the context. Now, Nelson Mandela Bay, I always say, was broken by design. It was broken so that people could loot from the state. Why do I say that? If you look at our annual financial statements today, there's about 20 billion rands worth of irregular expenditure on that annual financial statement. Now, irregular expenditure is incurred when you spend government's funding in contravention of supply chain processes, supply chain regulations.
Is that over a period of time?
It's over a period of time, for a couple of years. However, that 20 billion rand represents more irregular expenditure that has been spent than in any other, or incurred than in any other municipality in the country. But not just municipalities, more than any provincial government, even more than national government, which means that Nelson Mandela Bay is number 1 for one thing in the country, and that is looting from the state. So it was broken by design, and that is why people started seeing this collapse of service delivery. Do you know that over the last 3 financial years, the 2 preceding financial years to the one that we're just in, housing delivery in the city came to a grinding halt. Between
that's one of my questions.
The financial years 20 and 21, only 27 houses were built. Between
20 and 21, who was mayor during that time?
That was...
Who was in government?
That was Ngababanga, and the financial year after that...
So there was a DA-led coalition.
No, but you must understand, it's not that easy to rebuild. So let's get that clear before I continue. You cannot rebuild a broken administration within a couple of months. Okay, it is impossible. You can destroy a government institution within a couple of months. You can't rebuild it. It takes years to rebuild an administration. Now, in the financial year 20 and 21, and Ngababanga was only a mayor for about 5 months in that financial year. Only 27 RDP houses could be built. The financial year after that, which Ngaba was then ousted, and there was an ANC government brought in, built 28 houses. And only in the financial year 2022-2023 could we manage to build houses again. And we've completed about 850 houses. And again,
2022, 2023,
that's the financial year that ended now, end of June. So we managed to get housing delivery back on track, and there's also plans to build 1,400 houses in the new financial year, which is now 2023-2024. But the reality here is, this is the impact that a broken administration has on the people of Nelson Mandela Bay. And unfortunately, it's not easy to turn around. So to go back to your question, I know that I'm digressing, but I needed to paint this picture as to how easy it is to destroy an administration and why the administration was broken down. It was broken down so that people could loot. So to get back to your question, when Trollip came in, I believe that his predecessor, Mr. Danny Jordaan, actually already started turning the city around. It wouldn't have been possible.
So Danny Jordaan did a good job.
Danny Jordaan, together with Mr. Rory Reardon and Mr. Johan Metler, who was the city manager, they really wanted to turn things around in Nelson Mandela Bay, and they put in place a number of key decisions that certainly assisted the Trollip administration to turn the city around, and that basically laid the foundation. But obviously, as things work in government, it was too late. It was too late. I always explain to people that turning a government institution around is a bit like steering an oil tanker. If you want to change direction in an oil tanker, you need to do it a long time before it actually changes its course. And it's exactly the same thing. The decisions that Danny Jordaan and Johan Metler took could only be seen later on. And obviously, it was reinforced by the stability that the Trollip administration brought. And you spoke about the where we were voted second best in terms of the SA Customer Satisfaction Index. That wasn't the DA that said that we were the best, or it wasn't any politician, it wasn't even a city. It was a survey that was done independently that said that that people's confidence in the city has been restored, and it was a massive increase in satisfaction from our consumers. They could see that the city was making progress, and I think that Athol Trollip was a really good mayor, and he, of course, it wasn't just a DA government. There were coalition partners as well, and I believe that he was a good mayor because he had the very best intentions to turn the city around, but he was also supported by a really good city manager. Very sadly for us as a city, after Mr. Trollip was ousted and the DA coalition was toppled, Mr. Johan Metler was chased away like a dog out of the city. And then we saw that rapid collapse of the administration. So I think that when we talk about the improvements that we saw during that period, it was tangible. As MMC Finance, I can tell you that we spent our budgets to such an extent that we were rewarded with additional grant funding twice in that period. The first year we got an allocation of 178.8 million rand. That wasn't in from National Treasury. It wasn't in our budget. They said to us, "You can have this for Mahala. It's windfall allocation because you've spent your budgets better than any other municipality in the country."
If I can interject,
and before you do that, the year after that, we got another 200 million rand. That was the
National
last
Treasury.
time. Yes, it was the last time that that this city got additional grant funding, and that is the big game changer. We've got such a backlog in infrastructure, refurbishment, and new infrastructure that needs to be built. We need every cent that we can get. But over the 3 years preceding my arrival in Nelson Mandela Bay, we lost R1 billion. We didn't get anything additional. We lost R1 billion, forfeited that to National Treasury. It was allocated to other cities because we couldn't spend our money. So that is the change that we were talking about. From getting additional funding because we were doing the right thing to losing funding because we were not doing the right thing. And that's the sad decline that we saw over a period of time here.
What are those right things? Because I'm looking for practical things that 5-6 years from now, whoever is in government, that they could go back and say, these are some of the measures that Ethel Trollop's and Retief Odendaal's administration took to turn the city around. There must be practical
There's
things
a blueprint.
Okay.
There's
But
a blueprint.
what is the blueprint?
And the blueprint is you follow the legislation. That means that you must understand what you can do as a mayor and what you can't do as a mayor. And what you can do is you follow the delegations that's given to you by the legislation, and you do not interfere in the administration. And you make sure that nobody else interferes in the administration, because when politicians interfere in your administration, that facilitates looting. There can't be an untoward relationship between a politician and an administrator. The administrators must do what they do, and the politicians must do what they do. And the politician's job is to give policy direction, and administrators is supposed to implement. So in terms of the blueprint, is you make sure that you appoint the very best administrators, that you hold them to account, that there's monitoring and evaluation. You know that when we got when we took over government in September 2022, there were still hundreds of officials that never came back after the COVID pandemic. They were sitting at home. They were earning a salary. They didn't come to the office because nobody bothered to check. Now, that kind of irresponsible action by politicians can never be condoned. So you have to be hands-on. You have to hold your city manager to account. You have to make sure that you've got EDs, executive directors, that heads up departments that actually do their job. And if they don't, they must be sacked. Then you make sure that you meet your legislative obligations. You do not pick fights with National Treasury. If they give you advices, you implement their advices. Because remember, as a municipality, you cannot work in isolation. You've got a provincial government, provincial sphere, you've got a national government, national sphere, and they all have a vested interest in what you do as a municipality. Remember that all three spheres work independently from one another. But I've got a very, very special passion for local government, because that's where the tire hits the tar. When it comes to service delivery, if your municipality is dysfunctional, that is where your residents are going to feel the impact the most. Not necessarily when you've got a dysfunctional provincial government, but when you've got a dysfunctional municipality.
You were... and I just took this directly online off a news.
Before I just want to finish my blueprint.
Yes.
The blueprint's very easy. So I've explained what we must do. But there's also 3 easy steps. You make sure that nobody steals from the municipality. You make sure that you get value for money from your service providers. And you make sure that, thirdly, people that can afford to pay you. And if you follow those 3 simple principles, together with giving policy direction and making sure that you hold your officials to account, you can turn any
Getting value for
around.
Money from your service providers, what does that mean? Does
Getting
that mean
value
you
for money.
interfering with the supply chain?
No,
manager
you're
and
not
making
going to
sure
interfere, but you make sure that you get value for money. So, for example, in 2016, when I became the MMC for finance in the city, I realized that one company, the same company that was supplying light bulbs, the same light bulb that this city was using to the city of Cape Town. The only difference is they were were supplying it at nearly double the price in Nelson Mandela Bay than they were supplying to the city of Cape Town. That's not getting value for money. You want service providers that contract with the state.
So what did you do? How did you hold them accountable?
We set aside the contract because it is totally unacceptable. Another example there was a newspaper that arrived on my desk every day at that stage, and I was annoyed because
As a mayor?
No. I was in the MMC fund. I'm talking about 2016, and I was receiving the Herald newspaper, by the way, at my home every morning, and I was perplexed as to how does this happen. I then realized that there was a contract in place, a contract for 210,000 rand a year just to supply Herald newspapers to the MMCs, the mayor, the speaker, and the executive directors. And it worked out that this gentleman, he was quite clever and a good entrepreneur, was being paid nearly 50 rand per Herald newspaper that at that stage was costing about 5 rand if you had to go purchase it on the street. But this gentleman bought his Heralds every morning at 5 o'clock at a intersection on Warmer Boulevard and Beach Road, there where the freeway goes onto the beachfront. He was buying all of those papers there at a fraction of the price, 10%, and he had nearly a 1,000% markup on those newspapers. We put it aside. Yeah, well, I mean, the fact of the matter is he could make a profit, but not an undue profit, and we cancelled that contract as well. So making sure that you get value for money, you have a fiduciary duty as a politician to make sure that you get value for money. We currently have about 19 billion rand budget in Nelson Mandela Bay. 19.1 billion to make it very clear, and our capital budget is about 2 billion rand, and there's a lot of.
What does that mean?
About 2 billion rand. Capital budget is the funding that you can spend on capital infrastructure. It's all the roads, all the buildings that you see, houses that you build, and at the end of the day, the need in Nelson Mandela Bay as the poorest metro, and I use the term poorest metro, I can back it up. We are the poorest in relation to GDP per capita of all metropolitan municipalities in the country. Considering the backlog that we have in building new infrastructure for the people of Nelson Mandela Bay, there is no way that we can get away with overpaying service providers. We must make sure that we get bang for buck here, so that we can stretch every rand that we have to the maximum. We can't be overpaying service providers.
I took this directly from an article I saw online, and I'd like you to just speak on this. And it says there is considerable uncertainty around whether Nelson Mandela Bay Metro still has its DA mayor, Retief Odendaal. Eastern Cape MEC for Cooperative Government and Traditional Affairs, Zolile Williams, has promulgated a decision to change municipalities' structure from an executive system to a collective one in effort of removing Odendaal from his job. What was happening there? I remember seeing that case and following that case. What was happening? What does this mean when it says that the structure from an executive system to a collective? What does that mean?
So in municipalities, you've got two different systems. You've got a mayoral executive where you've got an executive mayor with executive powers, and he delegates some of his powers to his mayoral committee that will head up certain departments. That's the system that we have now.
So that's the executive system.
That's the executive system. Then there is the executive committee system, and that committee system means that you don't have an executive mayor. You've got a ceremonial mayor, okay? But you have 10 chairpersons in the committee that all have executive powers, but just on in relation to their specific portfolio. Now, the difference is the allocation that happens in terms of representation on the executive committee system. With a mayoral executive, you put together a coalition, or an alternative, you win outright, and those political parties will share the positions between them. In terms of an executive committee system, or collective executive as it's also known, There you go and see what the electoral outcome was. And in this case, the DA and the ANC both had 48 seats on council, which represented 40%. So the ANC will get 4 seats, the DA will get 4 seats, and the 2 remaining seats will be split to the 2 largest minority parties, which is the EFF and the Northern Alliance. And the reason that the MEC wanted to change the system was because the ANC said that they couldn't work with the smaller political parties. I never refer to them as smaller parties. I have to say minority parties, but they said that they can't govern with them. And there's a specific reason for that. Because for the ANC, it is a foreign concept to govern in coalitions. And they must get used to it, because South Africa is going to become coalition country. And coalitions can work. We've proven that on the back of the worst performance in a financial year since the inception of Nelson Mandela Bay in the financial year 21-22, we could turn the ship around. We could actually bring stability by putting together the most complex coalition government ever in South Africa. It is common cause that during that 8 months, we've brought stability to Nelson Mandela Bay. And it's not, again, not me saying so. It's the Auditor General highlighting what we've done in terms of key performance areas, what we've achieved. It's the improvements that the financials have shown. And although the city was far from being perfect or far from being fixed, because I told you it takes years to rebuild a broken administration, we made a tangible difference. So, and that's why I always say that political parties, all political parties, must understand. They must put away their own selfish interest. They must put away political self-interest and understand that the voters want us to work together. They want us to form coalitions, because that's the electoral outcome. It's going to happen at a provincial level. It's going to happen at a national level. And unfortunately, the ANC find it a foreign concept. DA has been working in coalitions for many years. That's how the first municipalities we wrestled from the control of the ANC. We did that by means of coalition. Helen Zille put together a 7-party coalition in 2006 to wrestle control of the city of Cape Town from the ANC. Look at where Cape Town is today. It's considered to be one of the most well-run cities in the country. Yes, it's got problems. Like all municipalities have got problems, but it is, by the benchmark of Salga and Auditor General, one of the best-run cities in the country. So the point I'm trying to make is that we, as a DA, find it far easier to work in coalition governments because we're not used to absolute power and we've got experience. The ANC must understand that when you're in a coalition, you don't have absolute power. You have to compromise. You have to take collective decisions. You have to sit around a table and find one another. And there can't be arrogance. There can't be a big brother in a coalition agreement. When we formed this coalition in Nelson Mandela Bay in September last year, we sat around a table and we said, we're going to be 10 equal partners. I don't care if you only have 1 seat and the DA has got 48. We're going to be equal partners because that's the nature of a coalition arrangement. I can't sit there and say, well, the DA is the big brother in this coalition. You're going to listen to us. That's not how it works. It works by admitting that we sit around a round table and we're all equal partners, because without one another, we'll never be able to run this coalition.
Just on that one point, and I don't want us to speak about that. I know we pressed for time. I read an article written by a couple of academics who argue differently on the case study of Cape Town, and I'm sure you've heard this plenty of times, and who just paint the picture of the difference between the poor and the rich in Cape Town, and how people in Khayelitsha and all of these poor areas live, and how there's such a gap between the poor and the rich. And I'm saying that because of that statement you made about how Cape Town is the most well-run city and all of that.
Yes, and I can give you a comment on that. We live in one of the most unequal societies in the world. And it's not just Cape Town, it's the entire South Africa. But I want to challenge whoever wrote that, Because I want to tell you that there's a story here in Nelson Mandela Bay where the ANC actually managed, an ANC government, let me not, or led government, actually made the poor poorer. You know what they did? There was, in 2018, by the end of the Trollop era, there was 3 basic services in terms of Council's indigent program delivered to 112,000 poor families in Nelson Mandela Bay. When I got back here last year, Council was delivering 3 basic services to only 42,000 households in the poorest metro in the entire country, which means that this city actually made the poor poorer. Now, that came around as a result of bureaucracy and incompetence by successive administrations. But in the city of Cape Town, you can actually go and see the work that they do in improving the lives of the most vulnerable residents. I've been there. I've seen their programs to upgrade informal settlements. The problem with the city of Cape Town is because it is attracting people that are coming there because they are in search of a better future. So, of course, they are continuously going to have a backlog in providing services. But I can tell you that without a doubt, and knowing government like the back of my hand, that you can see when you go into informal settlements in the city of Cape Town that the poor is better off under a government that actually functions well than in a government that doesn't function. When I became a mayor in Nelson Mandela Bay, there were so many of our new informal settlements that had no access to
what are those
sanitation.
informal settlements?
For example, Bayland. It's the biggest.
Where's Bayland again?
Bayland is just before you enter Dispatch on your right on
Yes,
the road
I've seen
between
it.
Kabeja and Dispatch.
Yeah.
That community is one of the poorest communities in Nelson Mandela Bay. It's also one of the biggest informal settlements.
Yeah.
I got there for a community of 5,000 people. There were 2 functioning standpipes. 2 functioning standpipes that provided water for that entire community. But listen to this. 10 chemical toilets that were never serviced. That was the extent of the services that no electricity, no refuse removal, 10 chemical toilets and 2 standpipes. What did we do? We immediately made sure that there were an additional 20 standpipes put into that community, so you don't have to walk hundreds of meters to go and collect water. We also made sure that we delivered 350 new chemical toilets that was serviced on a weekly basis. Now, I want to admit that chemical toilets is not for me not an acceptable a method of providing sanitation, but it's better than nothing. It's absolutely
why
better
couldn't you
than
guys
nothing.
build toilets for them?
Well, I mean, again, that goes hand in hand with planning for human settlements, and that's the other point that I want to make. We immediately sent human settlements in there to go and do an audit and do the planning and make sure that we can start with formal upgrades of that informal settlement. For the 5 years preceding our coalition government, there was nothing being done in that community. In any event, you know, that story is. I can tell you about. Area 11 in Ward 45 in KwaNobuhle, where we had a similar situation. Those residents actually protested when they heard I was going to be ousted, not because they want to support me, but because they were desperate being serviced, and I continuously went back there with my government, with the officials, to try and uplift that community. That community also had a problem with water, also had no chemical toilets, and we delivered to that community. And so I can tell you the story as to what happens to the poor in a dysfunctional administration like we've seen here in Nelson Mandela Bay. You can never compete that to what happens to the poor in a city that functions like the city of Cape Town. People always target the city of Cape Town. I was there just before I was ousted. I had to attend an event, and I went to go and listen to the mayor unpacking how they were launching 5 social housing developments since 2021, since taking office after the local government elections. Do you know that in Nelson Mandela Bay, not a single social housing development has been launched since 2021? Now, that's the difference between a functioning and forget about the politics, and whether it's DA, ANC. What we need in South Africa is local government that works.
Yeah.
And I have echoed this over and over and over, where I said, I don't care from what political party you come from, but we need to work together in order to make a difference. Stop the bickering and the fighting over nonsense. Just get on with the job. That's what the voters expect of us. There's a time for politics, That's when there's an election, a couple of months before. Then you can go and fight with one another and go and convince the public who's the better party. But when you're in council, stop the bickering and work together and find solutions towards the problems of other people.
I know I've got to let you go now, but I often think about how we could tighten the legislative framework so that people or mayors are not voted out so easily all the time. I'm not sure if there's anything that can be done about that. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that. But I wanted to ask you two more questions. One was, when you reflect, you were the mayor here for 8 to 9 months. When you sit back and think and sleep, what are you most proud of about your legacy of 8 months as the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay? I enjoyed seeing, and perhaps that's something that your administration and your communication department was very good at. I enjoyed seeing a lot of posts about you visiting informal settlements. I thought that was something that I hadn't seen, that I was seeing more and more and more and more. You visiting the poorest of the poor, and not only visiting them once and posting about what's happening, but also going back to those communities and reporting. So what are you most proud of, very briefly, before we let you go, in terms of your tenure as mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay?
I think, and I can talk at length about it. First of all, it wasn't the communications department, it was me. I ran my own social media, I still do. And, there was only one lady that assisted with the messenger messages, because there were about 100 complaints every day that I couldn't deal with. But the messages that was responded to, that was me. The posts that were made, that was me. I did it myself. And I'm very, and I'm very proud of the fact that I was transparent. I didn't tell people, or I didn't try and mislead people as to the status of Nelson Mandela Bay, telling them that this government has fixed the city. I was brutally honest. I told them what they needed to hear, that the city was broken, but this is the plan to fix it. So what am I the most proud of? The fact that we could stabilize the administration, that we could meet all legislative commitments. You know that the previous financial year, the ANC couldn't even pass the budget. They forfeited more than 300 million rand because they couldn't spend their budgets. We fast-tracked spending.
Is that because of them disagreeing on what direction to take?
Because there was such a lot of infighting between the various parties. So we managed to stabilize that. And one of the other issues that I'm the most proud of is the fact that we prevented the city from running dry. Day zero was a real thing here in Nelson Mandela Bay, and we managed to ensure that we complete our drought mitigation and water augmentation projects. Went on a very, very serious communications plan to convince people that if they don't reduce their consumption, we will run dry, and we didn't run dry at the end. That was a huge achievement. We also made sure that we could get the housing development in Nelson Mandela Bay back on track. That to me was significant because of the fact that it is estimated by the year 2050, Nelson Mandela Bay will have a 90,000 unit backlog in housing delivery. It is criminal that we were building 27 and 28 houses, Mickey Mouse numbers, considering what backlog we're facing. So that's also a tremendous achievement. And I spent a lot of time rebuilding the relationships between National Treasury and the city, Department of Water and Sanitation and the city. Those relationships were all neglected and were all broken down. National government is not your enemy. And it might sound strange because I come from a different political party. We all have to work. So
you work very, very well with the ANC national officials.
I will well, not all of them, but I rebuilt relationships because I believe that when you're in government, You have to work together to achieve your targets. You can't play petty politics with the lives of people. And that is what our politicians must understand these days.
Thank you so much for your time. Breaking news. You are saying 30 seconds is a press conference. I know that people are knocking. Breaking news. You're saying by the time this gets out, you would have had the press conference already. But the National Treasury is now withholding, I don't know how much because of?
Is withholding grant funding from the city. We're exactly where we were 3 years ago when relations between the city and National Treasury were also broken, and they're now withholding an amount of 600 million rand from the city. In fact, they've indicated they're not going to pay a further cent to the city if we do not get our act together. So,
does that mean getting him out of the NPD?
In all probability, that's going to have to be done. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
It was lovely. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Man.